Sorry, y'all. Can y'all hear me now? I I said so much during that time. There's so much knowledge just lost like tears in the rain. Hopefully y'all can hear me now. I've turned on the mic. I forgot to do a mic check before I hit record. Great. Uh, there's probably a lot of stuff that y'all didn't need to hear me talk about because I was just talking about my fussy back and how I'm going to yoga. But I might go over what I was talking about previously, which was or after that topic, which was about print resolution, right? So I was just explaining. Uh, so y'all are probably watching me and like, what the hell is he talking about? So what I was talking about is when I design like a webtoon episode, um, what I do is I make the episode first as a comic page. And so right now, what y'all are seeing, I have hid certain panels from the comic page because they're kind of spoiler heavy, and I don't want y'all to see that. And anyway, this is just to give y'all an idea of sort of like what a page generally looks like. My idea is that I generally will do this for the purpose of I want to make I want to make it such that it's a very easy translation between digital webtoon and print, right? So there are a couple reasons why I do it this way. One of the reasons is that it's much easier to translate from comic to webtoon versus vice versa, right? And the main reason for that is that if you're working digitally on Webtoon, you're working generally at a 72 DPI. You can go higher, but generally with digital stuff, everything reduces to the lowest possible resolution size just to save space for servers and whatever because you're ultimately you're uploading your comics up to Webtoon, and they have certain size regulations, right? They have size limits for what you can upload. So generally, your files are limited to a 72 DPI resolution. Well, that's a very difficult translation over to print comics because print comics need to be printed at a 300 DPI. If you do anything less than 300 DPI, you're going to get major issues with pixelation in your picture, fuzziness, and that might not be so much of an issue probably for your imagery, but it becomes a major issue for your type, for your font. So if most comics, right, are written with dialogue, word balloons, etc., there you have to have some amount of leeway to consider like how is your type going to look when it finally goes to print. So this is why I do it like this is that I have it already figured out for print dimensions well before I ever the comic like the Legend of Redneck may never see print. I don't know. But I do it that way for the purposes of if it does happen because that was where I was trained first was in print comics. And also, like, people do like the idea of having a printed collection. I definitely get emails all the time about a printed collection for Trailer Park Warlock. That, however, is off. That will happen one day, but that's going to be in the distant future and not right now, due to contractual obligations with Webtoon. But all that aside, um, Legend of Redneck, totally different story. So like if readers suddenly start, um, tipping their hat my way, going, "Hey, we would like to see a collection of the Legend of Redneck," I'm good to go because I already have this file set up for print. And as I was saying, much easier process translating a printed comic for Webtoon. The only the only thing is, and this is my one like issue or complaint about making things for Webtoon, is that you cannot do. I don't really have a good example, but like maybe I can just hold on. I'll draw it real quick. Um, so like, let me show you. We'll just like thumb out like a typical, print comic page, right? Um, well, on a print comic page, you can have all kinds of different size panels, right? You got some long ones, you can get some tall ones. You can do like does it say this is an establishing shot? There's like buildings and whatever, spaceships, you name it, um, whatever, right? I'm just kind of thumbing out an idea here, right? You can have square panels, every panel size possible. So these kind of panels, these long establishing shot type panels, basically impossible to translate to Webtoon, unless you do it like that, and it just doesn't look. I mean, it just doesn't look good. It's not a good look. It just doesn't translate very well to the vertical format. Like, you would have to do something where you put in a little line, right, where you're saying, please turn your phone sideways, and it's just like, it's very awkward. I've seen people try workarounds, and it's just like not quite. It doesn't quite translate very well. So generally, most of my composition, and I've had to change the way that I compose panels now that I do so much stuff on Webtoon. Most of my compositions tend to be like, there's the standard 9-panel page layout. This is the tried and true. If you just need to get stuff done, right? Or for instance, you can do a 6-panel layout. This is getting a little bit crunchy here. I'll just clean it up a little bit. All right, 6-panel layout. Those work really well translating to Webtoon. And there is, like I said, there is wiggle room. You can have a mix, or you can think about, like, you can do a square panel, and then you can also have smaller. You don't want to go too big. You got to be careful with your dimensions, but you can do like these sort of more horizontal oriented type panels. But you need to make sure not to break into, extend it too far out, because then you're going to get a situation. Look, camera, please work with me. You're reading my hands, and I don't. Alexandra P. Speaking as a reader, I have seen so many panels of large, wide, establishing shots sideways, and it never fails looking weird. Yeah, I mean that's how I feel about it too. So like I was saying, like what you can there is wiggle room to do literally any other layout other than what I was talking about. You just cannot do those wide establishing shots. It's the only thing that doesn't really work. But everything else works pretty good. So like I said, that's my main complaint, if I had any real complaints. And like the thing is like as an artist and storyteller, something that I've had to learn over time is I have to kind of adjust my standards isn't the right way to put it, but like adjust like how I think about how I'm writing a story based on what are the popular formats in use, right? Because those popular formats have changed. Webtoon didn't exist, for me anyway. It didn't exist back in 2011, and it was just sort of an idea in my head, right? Because before Webtoon, there was like Scott McCloud talked forever. Scott McCloud's kind of like one of the few comics academic types. He had talked back in, I don't know, probably the early aughts about, this idea of one of the big advantages of digital comics is you have what's called the infinite canvas, right? Well, Webtoon is that. Webtoon is the infinite canvas. You can make that, well, if you're a canvas creator, but if you're, ironically, but if you're an originals creator, that story can be pretty much as long as you want it, right? Blue mouse art. Yes, it's fine on the phone, but a regular computer, it's a bit awkward. Right. It would just, I mean, that wide shot would just, right, if you're like reading it on a laptop or desk screen. I guess if you're doing it on a laptop, you could like take the laptop, right? It would be pretty awkward. Um, so anyway, oh gosh, where was I? So, infinite canvas. So that is the big advantage of Webtoon and just internet comics in general, is you do have access to basically this infinite scroll, right? Which can be a huge advantage if you're going for certain effects. I've only ever used that a couple of times to its advantage. I think maybe this is just me being old man, but like I do think as I've gotten older, like I'm less interested in doing compositional tricks and more interested in just like how can I get a story told and how can I do it in a way that makes sense in terms of the amount of energy that I have in me, right? Time, all that stuff. And then like is to the point of telling the story, right? And not like confusing readers. That is to me that has been my main goal, is like figuring out how can I tell these stories without like confusing readers, because oftentimes, excuse me, a lot of these stories that I write tend to be on a slightly more complex side in terms of like stuff that happens maybe in the story or like lore or things like that. So like the last thing you want to do when you're making a more complex storyline is like mess with the formatting stuff, mess with the you know the editing, quote unquote, or like using stylistic storytelling techniques that might be confusing otherwise. Like stories where you have really stylish, complex editing or complex layouts work really well if your story is more on the simple side, and that's not a knock against simple stories. That's saying what simple stories, like that's where their strength is, right? Their strength is you can you can do a lot more play with how you tell that story. And like I said, typically I want to do more stuff where the complexity is on the storyline and the characters. So like the last thing I want to do is mix it up and have like you know weird layouts or confusing layouts. Um, it can like confusing layouts in a this is more of an issue I think in print comics more so in Webtoon. I mean, not that I've read that many Webtoons, but the ones that I have read, even the more complex layouts tend to be pretty readable. Like I said, other than like doing the turn your phone on your side kind of thing. And I've seen like there's a webtoon I do really like called Helper. It does this thing where it's like there will be little like writer's notes of like scroll this panel really fast and stuff like that. And like it's a cool idea, but when I was reading, I was like, I don't. Can I just read the story? like, um, those kind of things are like fun in theory, but in actual execution, I don't think they work out that well, right? Like I think more often than not, readers don't want readers want as little interruption in their reading experience as possible. And that's probably like my best to the writers out there, like that's my best advice in terms of like when you're thinking about writing to anybody. um I think the best like fundamental baseline tip you can give somebody, just try and not interrupt your reader as much as possible. If that means that your like panel layouts have to be extremely simple and like basic, like Legend of Redneck, I'm starting to kind of play with some of the layouts a little bit in the last couple episodes I've been doing, but um, pretty much all of my episodes up until recently have been very basic 6 panel squares. And the reason I did that, there was multiple reasons why I did that. One of the reasons was part of an inspiration for writing this for me was reconnecting with like the Sunday Funny comic strips for me, which most of those Sunday Funny comic strips had very simple layouts. Although there were certainly strips that had some play with that and did some interesting stuff, but in general, it was very like duh 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 duh, like basic layouts. Um, so for me, that was one part of like me reconnecting with that. I've also just found it to be a much easier way of telling a story because I'm spending less time thinking about like, oh well, you know, complex layouts. How can I like impress readers or whatever? I I don't know. Like I think generally, I don't think readers care. I think that that's something that more like artists care about. Like they pay more attention to that because they're always kind of looking for new inspiration and stuff. But I think generally readers, and I could be wrong about this, and I'd be curious if y'all have any opposing opinions to this, but like I think generally readers kind of treat reading comics, webtoons, etc., sort of like TV. Like they don't want to be, once again, going back to that theme that I was talking about, they don't want something to interrupt or like sort of throw them off of like where they were in the story. They want to be engrossed, they want to be immersed, they want to be like, you know, lost for a couple minutes in something that can pull them in and like allow them to enjoy something that is separate from like the chaos of everyday life, right? Um, so like I said, like this is all the thoughts that go into my mind when writing The Legend of Redneck. Those thoughts, not so much. They didn't come so much into like writing Trailer Park Warlock. I wasn't very. I don't know what's the word. I wouldn't say that I was very deliberate in how I was laying out panels and stuff. It was just kind of like I kind of just whatever works. That especially became the case as I was doing, as I was knee deep into like the Webtoon production model. Um, so it's a very interesting point to be at with Legend of Redneck because I'm not I'm not as intensely caught up into trying to appease Webtoon editors for this one, at least not currently. And so I'm I'm not as like worried about what my layouts are or how like how well does it fit the Webtoon format. Although I'm certainly thinking about it, it's just not with the same intensity. But there was a comment from Blue Mouse Art. For me personally, I enjoy a gimmick, but if the story is good, the story is good, and that would keep me around over the gimmick. As an artist, the gimmick is a fun idea and makes me think how to implement that, but um, in a more practical way. For sure, and like I said, it's like it's a funny kind of thing because artists think about it a bit differently from readers, right? Where readers probably, I would even go to say like if you're a reader of Webtoon or comics in general, right? And the last thought in your mind is like, well, how am I going to make something like this? You're just like unconsciously, to a certain extent, taking everything in. There is this kind of unfortunate thing that happens when you're an artist. You start analyzing stuff and you start analyzing all of the stories that you come across. And so it actually kind of, in a kind of a sad way, it kind of takes away a little bit of the joy of like reading and enjoying art in that you, and I shouldn't say it takes away the joy, it changes it. It changes it in a way where it's like you're no longer just like able to totally appreciate a story on the grounds of its storiness. Now you're appreciating it on the grounds of like, oh, how did the author do that? Like now I need to break it apart and, you know, take it apart and kind of like figure out how do I want to do it my own way if I wanted to do something like that. It's I've noticed this too with movies. I've had this has been a big issue for me with like going to see movies is like I don't really worry that much about, you know, like, oh, that doesn't really make sense in the story or whatever. Although that'll bug me, but like I'll pay attention to like editing and like sound design and stuff like that. And like it has made it a lot harder for me to get into a lot of movies because then I'm just like, okay, what what did they like what did they do? How did they that shot right there didn't make any sense, stuff like that. Like it's the same thing that can happen with me with comics too, where I end up becoming over analytical and taking everything apart. Um, but at the same time, like I said, there is a certain amount of fun that comes with that too. It's just not the same kind of fun. It's kind of like I traded in one way to have fun with comics for another way to have fun with comics. You know, it's not as I don't know. It's not in a sense it's almost not as pure. Blue Mouse Art says, "Oh, totally. I have what I call the fun watch, which is my first watch slash read of anything, and then if I rewatch, reread, it's the critical viewing. You know, that's probably what I need to do. I don't have like a fun. I don't have a fun watch. It's all critical from the beginning, which you know takes away a lot of the fun, as you were saying. So almost done with this first panel here. After which point we have the big panel. But I do enjoy the heck out of like talking about comics analysis and like, you know, it's not, I wouldn't say it's necessarily the more academic side of stuff, but just like the more inside baseball, shop talk stuff. That's something I used to do a lot when I lived in Portland, and then haven't had so many artists around me where I live. So like, you know, fortunately I get it talking with y'all, talking with other webtoon creators on social media and stuff. It's been good. So this character who is the shopkeep in the dungeons of Ganderdalf's castle. Many people have mistook this character for Judy, and I actually very explicitly like drew the scene to make it absolutely certain to people like these are two totally different characters. Um, sometimes you have to do that. It wasn't all the readers, but there were a couple readers who thought that this character was Judy. I was like, wait, what? Judy doesn't wear glasses. Like, how did that happen? Although it is kind of a funny idea that like it's a funny idea to me that like I think maybe the way they read it was like Judy was like the one employee in the entire castle, which is actually a really funny idea, but like that wasn't what I was going for. Maybe if I was doing a different kind of story, but there's a really funny idea. So I've talked about this in the past. These characters, these horned demon pig, whatever creatures you want to call them. I call them Hellions, and so like uh, in my design for them, the lady Hellions they have like overbites, and the guy Hellions have underbites, and that's like more lore than you were asking for this stream. All right, this is kind of I did a lot of layering for this panel, so I had to get the underdrawing set up. So I need to straighten it out real quick. What was where? It's kind of messy. But these are always kind of complex. All right. There's a lot of characters too. The Clip Studio line tool is one of my best friends. Cause I still struggle with like enjoying drawing backgrounds, but something that I have learned with more experience is like just how important they are. And the thing is like I guess when I say backgrounds, I also mean just like things in the environment, right? Um, so you know, desks and chairs and cupboards. I don't know how many stories call for cupboards, but things like that. They're not my favorite thing to draw. I am not. I've yet to figure out how to like connect with drawing inanimate objects. I know that there are people who like that is their thing, and I envy them a little bit because, and maybe it's the reverse. Maybe they envy people who are like really good at drawing like animate things. Maybe they're not good at drawing them. I don't know. Um, so like for instance, like a really famous example is like Hayao Miyazaki in like his planes, right? I love the way he draws planes. Like he draws these really interesting like they look like they could have existed but they clearly never did exist kind of planes. Especially for like there's a scene. I don't know how many of y'all have seen the Wind Rises, but there's this scene where there's a couple of scenes where the main character has these sort of bizarre, surreal like conversations with this old Italian engineer, and you see like all these different kind of fantasy planes, and I guess the intent is like um, the story is trying to get across like this Italian engineer had so many different ideas, right, for planes and stuff that never like got made, never made it. But not to say that Miyazaki designed all those, but they're definitely in his style. And like if you read a story like Nausicaa, I'll get to that in a second. Anyway, those scenes include a lot of those kind of planes that I'm thinking about. So what I was saying a moment ago is if you read the manga for Nausicaa, which I highly recommend, it's I'm not a big I don't know, I'm kind of a book snob with Nausicaa. Like the movie is all right. And as far as I'm aware, the movie was sort of produced while Miyazaki was in the middle of doing the manga. Um, so I think that's part of the reason why it's a little bit how it is. Um, I highly recommend the manga. That's all I'm gonna say. And the way that like he draws the planes in the manga And they're very similar to how they're drawn in the movie. Just so I don't know. Like it's one of those things where I don't understand. I don't understand how he draws inorganic things that have this organic quality to them that like makes them look alive. That to me is like I can't figure it out. Like it's like alchemy or like it's a kind of I don't know. He just has a knack for it that I have never had in my life. And I think the other thing is like I never had like that desire, I guess. Like I've always been sort of a character designer personality as an artist. Like I really love drawing characters and I really love drawing like nature stuff, right? Like that's as far as background stuff, I would probably put all of my stories that I write like, out in the middle of nature, but you know, that there are scenes where that doesn't make sense, right? There are points in the story where it's like you have to be inside a house or like it's getting warm or a car or oh I should okay I needed to edit something there um or a movie theater, which that's a nightmare to draw, by the way. Um, Try and leave movie theaters out of anything you write. Probably the most nightmare thing to draw is stairs and like spiral staircases. Now I get that's where like something like Google SketchUp comes in handy, or like photo reference or whatever. But I'm not. I try and veer away from Google SketchUp as much as I can. And it's largely because there's the one issue with it is that if you're not, I don't know, like you have to put a little extra time into it to make sure that the backgrounds don't look like Google SketchUp, right? Where, you want to make sure it doesn't look too much like a wireframe thing because then it'll end up looking really stiff and it'll look sort of out of sorts with the characters in the story. That's generally why I draw backgrounds the way that I do, where it is more sort of, I don't know, I'm kind of like making it up on the fly kind of thing, because it's a way for me to make sure that the characters look like they're occupying the same physical universe, right? Um, and some people can pull it off great. I'm just not. I haven't ever found it to work for myself. But getting back to what my original point in this topic is, I think I don't know, like my best advice probably for people who are like trying to figure out how to better incorporate backgrounds into their story, I would say like you don't have to depict in detail every single thing like you were doing backgrounds for a Ghibli film, right? Like you don't have to do that. And actually, I mean, there is an argument that can be made that too much detail in a background can be distracting for a reader. Um, I think that because I've noticed this with the webtoons that I have read that generally they're very light on backgrounds, which I don't think is generally not that big of a deal. I mean, most manga is that way. Um, However, I would say like there are several webtoons that I read where the most of an establishing shot you'll get is like the side corner of like an office building and like a tree, and then that's like all you get in terms of your idea of like where is the story taking place. And maybe for certain stories that doesn't matter as much. Like for instance, like maybe that doesn't matter as much for Lore Olympus, but like I read through enough of Lore Olympus to sort of see like, okay, we're not going to deal too much with backgrounds in the story. And the reason why I might argue that that could work for Lore Olympus is that, it is like mythological in its scope. So, like, you can be like, well, this is kind of a metaphysical space. It doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be grounded in the same way that, like, if it were a romance story that took place in Topanga, Kansas, or whatever, or Florida, or wherever Topanga is. I don't know where Topanga is. Um, or Boulder, Colorado, or San Diego, right? If your story takes place in nondescript mythical land or Olympus or whatever, you do have a lot more room to get away with stuff. But I do think there is a sort of a disservice that you're doing to the reader, which is you have an opportunity to more distinctly sort of give a vibe for your universe. And one of the best ways to do that is in how you depict your environment. And now I get it, like there's other reasons why a lot of those comics are drawn the way that they're drawn. There's not a lot of time, right, to depict all that stuff because, deadlines are brutal. That's a reality. Um, you only have so much time, even with assistance, right? Um, you know, a lot of those webtoon originals are running. Oh, I mean, at least 80 to 100, probably 120 panels per episode per week. That's not like you're not gonna have. I get it. You're not gonna have time to like draw all the backgrounds. So there's certainly I would say like that's the other reason, right? Why those comics are drawn that way. I do feel a bit. I don't know what the word is. Like I guess sad or whatever. Like I do feel like that's a little bit unfortunate because it forces artists to make sort of storytelling decisions that go against maybe what would make an even better story. I'll try and leave it at that. Because I don't want to like I don't say this like I don't want to complain, right? This is not a complaint. It's like just things I've observed, things that I've noticed, that on the one hand kind of also act as ways of providing sort of a signature to what a webtoon story looks like, but at the same time, um, sometimes that could be kind of a negative because if you compare maybe the way like a typical webtoon panel is drawn versus I don't know, like a DC or Marvel comic, not that those are necessarily the high points of American comics or comics in general, but I will say let's say you read a Batman story by like an artist like Sean Gordon Murphy or a story drawn by somebody like Jorge Corona, you're gonna get a very enveloped environment and atmosphere. You're going to get the inclusion of a lot of detail to your universe, and it does add a certain amount of immersiveness to the story, I would say. And like I said, I mean, there are advantages to having less background. It does create sort of an immersiveness in other ways where your focus is more on sort of the emotions, the emotional impact of stuff. Um, you get immersed more into the character drama, which is on theme with most webtoon original stories, right? And I will like backtrack a little bit in this topic and say like for all the stories that I have read or looked at that don't have a lot of backgrounds are like really sparse with the backgrounds, there are plenty of other stories where I would say they go all out, and those tend to be more the like the specifically Korean made stories. I'm kind of assuming because they have larger pools of assistants. I don't really know, um, but it does kind of seem that way because I think this is very speculative where I'm going right now, but I'm of the opinion that American webtoon authors are not paid so much in their original series, probably because it is harder for Webtoon to afford them, whereas because they have to deal with the exchange rate between Korea and the United States, whereas the Korean made stories, there's no exchange rate they have to deal with. They don't have to deal with um, that translation. So I think my speculation, and I wish I actually had evidence or information that would back it up. Like I said, this is just pure speculation. My speculation is that the Korean authors in general are, if you compared incomes, their incomes are probably higher. Now, granted, a lot of that income goes towards their assistants, but they can afford their assistants a lot better than like the American authors. Because in general, I think the American authors, it's very hard to afford an assistant. Like when I was doing Trailer Park Warlock, I probably there were 2 seasons where I had somebody assist me with doing like some coloring work, and mostly what they were doing were like flats. I was, I was paying them maybe, I mean, at best, probably 10 an hour, maybe 15 an hour at the time. Which is not terrible for flatting, but it's not great either. Like, it was one of those things where it was like, there was a point where it was like, I don't feel good charging for this, and I can like, or not charging for this, but the amount that I'm paying, I don't feel great about. Even though it's not that much work, but it was just like, I don't know, it was one of those things where it was like, I guess I'll just do it myself because I I have done flatting work myself, and it's very tedious. And like, I'm probably gonna do some flatting in a little bit, right? And I've gotten to the point where I've gotten so fast at it, like I generally, if I paid somebody, I would pay them to do like just do the coloring work itself, and and I would do the flatting just because I've, I guess I'm that confident in my flatting. That was another, I guess, benefit that came from being forged in the fire of coloring the Plants vs Zombies comic, because you just had to be really fast to color that comic. It was a nightmare. It was such a nightmare. But I will say that it's very interesting because I have noticed, like, I kind of thought that when the Plants vs Zombies comic was done, that that would be it. Like, I wouldn't really hear much about it, you know? And I still get people who, like, will contact me about it in, like, talk about, like, oh, me and my kid, we found this in the bookstore and we really loved it, blah, blah, blah. And, like, that has very much, like, kind of, um, that went against my expectations. I guess that's the best way I could put that. Because, like I said, that was one where I was just like, I kind of thought it would be done after I was done with it. And I feel like that's the case for most everybody who worked on that. I think a lot of people were like, this isn't going to go that far. And then It ended up, placing on like a New York Times bestseller list and all this other stuff, and we're just like, oh, well, I guess there was more of an audience here than we thought. Stories can really surprise you in that way. It can be very surprising, like the lifespan a story will have, because I think, I mean, for myself personally, a lot of my assumption has been, you put, especially in this day and age where there's like a million things to read and watch and whatever. Like, my expectation has been I'll make something, it goes out, and like the day people read it, that's it. It's done. You know, like it'll in one ear or in one eye, out the other, whatever. Like, it's just, you know, they read it and it's done. It's been digested. It's been scrapped, and they're moving on to the next thing. And like I said, it's just, there's just so much stuff these days. I could not have imagined, like as a kid, the closest thing I can think of was when I first got into anime, like in middle school and high school. And I started buying DVDs at Suncoast Video. Um, at that time, I thought, like when I discovered anime, I was just like, there's so much here. I'll never like, I'll never get to the end of it. And and nowadays it's like you throw that in with YouTube and all the streaming stuff and all that. It's like in Webtoon and everything else. It's like I don't even know where to begin now if I want to entertain myself. Like I'm so overwhelmed, I can't even entertain myself. I would rather like just lay on the couch and like listen to music. Um, Even though there's a ton of music too, there's more music than I can possibly hope to ever like satisfy myself with. Um, there's just so much stuff that I'm kind of like, I might just take up meditation full time and just devote myself to that rather than like try and catch up on like every series and whatever. Like I'm still not. There's so much stuff I haven't caught up on. I'm like so behind on everything, and people, because I'll hear people talk about whatever. Like secession was this big thing that people were into for a while, and I was just like, I don't know. I mean, sounds good. I haven't touched it. People talk about stuff like all those HBO series, like White Lotus and all that stuff. I'm like, I'm sorry. I'm maybe one day I'll catch up on it. Like I tried to keep up with Better Call Saul. And that was another because I really liked Breaking Bad at the time, and like my sister and a bunch of friends were into Better Call Saul, and I was like, oh yeah, I like Breaking Bad. I'll try and keep up with this. And like I watched the first 3 seasons, and then after the whole like storyline with his brother and all that stuff, I was just like, I can't keep up with this anymore because I'm just like too bogged down with everything else. So like my main form of extracurricular entertainment has been like reading about Taoism or like or learning about baking. That's my new thing right now. I'm actually very heavily considering learning how to make baguettes. Like I've already learned technically, but I haven't actually made one yet. I did successfully make like pretzels, but then also what they call them on the internet is croissant pretzels, but I call them poissonsels. Um, I've learned how to make those. So after getting those under my belt, I was like, you know what? Maybe I could try and make a baguette. Like in my mind, a French baguette seems like high tier baking, like. But after like watching some videos and sort of learning what it entails, not that complicated. I mean, it's not more complicated than making croissants. That's for sure. Those are complicated. Um, the only thing is like the only thing with baking is there is a lot of time just sitting and waiting for things to get ready because you gotta have your yeast get ready. Like it's gotta take like there's one baguette recipe. You have to make this thing called a Polish. And it's not like it's very difficult to make. It just takes a long time. So like you basically mix yeast with flour and some water, and you just let it hang out in like a storage container for a day. And so like you've already added 24 hours to your prep time for your baguette. If you want to make it this way, like this was the most complicated possible way to make it. Um, but it'll be very good. That's the promise. Is like that's high S tier baguette making. You have to have a Polish. Um, so on top of that, right? You go through that 24-hour process, then you like make the actual dough itself. And so after you've like combined the dough together, right? And you've got like a dough, that dough has to sit for about 3 hours off and on. So like you have to check in on the dough, like I don't know, like you're a nurse at the hospital or whatever. You gotta check in on the dough like every 30 minutes and like give it a stress test to make sure that it builds strength, so that it can finally be molded and put in the oven. Well, you know, this is not particularly complicated math, right? This is 27 hours of prep time for your French baguette. Now, there's another recipe I found that's like 5 minutes. So I'm probably going to go with that one. But like the person who told me about the recipe or, the YouTube video, they were like, it's like not primo baguette. It's not like the best possible baguette. So I'll probably start with the 5 minute one first and then move on, rank up to the, higher tier baguette once I have that 5 minute the 5 minute recipe under my belt. But I can say with confidence that pretzels, like soft baked pretzels, pretty easy to make and very delicious. Um, Surprisingly easy. Like literally, it's just like you throw yeast, flour. I'm trying to remember what I did. Yeah, yeast, flour. I have a stand mixer. I got gifted a stand mixer for Christmas, which was kind of an amazing Christmas present to get. Um, I guess it's amazing when you're when you're older than 35, because I guess like I don't know, a typical like 26-year-old or whatever. Maybe I'm assuming too much, but like younger people might be like, oh, well, like a PlayStation 5 or something. And I'm like, a stand mixer. Holy crap. Like, that's the stuff that I get excited for as I get older. Like air fryers, stand mixers. Um, the next thing I need is a food processor. If I can get a food processor and a pressure cooker, those two things, I think I would have like all the tools I need to have like a perfectly complete kitchen. But anyway, pretzels. So yeah, yeast, flour. You need the dough, right? Pretty basic. You need water. Um, Yeah, you knead it, and then you like put it out on the board, and then I'm trying to figure out why. Oh, you knead it out on the board, and then you roll it as you want, as you wish, right? Um, Super simple, super delicious. Takes. I'm trying to remember how long it took me to cook those. I think it was like 20 minutes. Yeah, it was like 20 minutes. You know, oh, I forgot one part of that process. You also have to have the saline bath. So that's like you boil water with baking soda in it, and then you dip. This is actually kind of a weird part of the process. You dip the dough into the saline bath for only like 10, 15 seconds. So very super short amount of time, right? You don't want to put too much time into it. Oh, I'm trying to just trying to move my thing around. My cursor. Um, the saline bath. So like, yeah, it's you're like taking raw dough and dipping it into the saline bath, which you would think would cook the dough, and I kind of think that's the idea because it is a very short amount of time, right? It's only like I said, it's only 10, 15 seconds, so it's not a lot. But in that time, you are kind of like pre-cooking the dough a little bit before you send it in to bake. Um, but what it's supposed to do is it's supposed to create that like that coat that pretzels have, that kind of shiny coat. Um, I haven't tried making pretzels like by skipping that part, so I don't know what would happen. But I'm assuming it would just not have the coat. I guess it would taste different. So anyway, my next baking project is either French baguette or ciabatta. That's probably ciabatta would be pretty good. I'm a big fan of both. It's just that the French baguette, in my mind, is like, even though it's not high, I don't know, it can be high class. It doesn't have to be. It can be whatever, right? Um, the French baguette, in my mind, seems more primo, but ciabatta is just delicious. And I have to like my dream list is French baguette, ciabatta, and then focaccia. If I can get those three made, I will feel successful as a baker. Oh, and then pita. Like I love pita bread, so that's probably gonna have to happen at some point too. I don't know. I feel like there are other things that I want to bake that I haven't really considered yet. Like dessert type stuff. But I feel like I don't know. Here's my thing about like making desserts is Blue Mouse says, "Ha, for real. I'm happy when I get nice socks because then I have money to buy other things I want." Oh yeah, in reference to Christmas presents as you get older. Yeah, for sure. I I used to not like getting socks, and now I actually really like socks. And part of that is like, my family's into like doing kind of like silly socks or whatever, you know. So there's always kind of like new, weird sock designs that I get to have, and like those become little fun set pieces for my day. Like I got socks this last Christmas that were like rock guitars and stuff, which I liked. Although I don't wear it very often. I need to find an occasion. I don't really go to a lot of music shows lately, but would be perfect for that kind of occasion. Um, I think my favorite socks that I like, funny socks or whatever you want to call them, that I have right now are like my cryptid socks. So it's got like a Loch Ness monster and Mothman, Bigfoot, and ET, that kind of stuff. Those are fun socks. I don't know. That hand, maybe that hand is weird. I think the problem with that hand is that there's not enough variation in like the size of the fingers. So I feel like I need to go a layer down and just adjust. I still have difficulty with drawing hands. It was actually like, I have to say, like one of the more validating things I've seen in a while was like how much difficulty like artificial intelligence has with drawing hands. And I was like, oh, okay, it's not just me. Like, uh, hands are hard to draw. I've gotten way better at drawing them over the years, but like, I still have times where I'm just like, I don't, like, I have to use some kind of reference or something to get it right. And you can express a lot with hands. So they are definitely like a part of the drawing puzzle where if you can if you can get confident at it, you know, it can really say a lot in your drawing. Blue Mouse Art says French baguettes seem hard to me. I am an amateur bread maker. Yeah, I'm with you. I'm amateur as well. I would say the recipe I found seemed easy enough that I'm willing to try it. And it's also, I think the other thing that was appealing to me was that it was like I was saying in the recipes that I saw, there was a 5 minute variant, a 3 hour variant, and then like a 27-hour variant, right? I'm sure the 27-hour variant is like a delicious, right? Like ratatouille level experience. I, however, do not know if I want to put 27 hours into making a French baguette. At least not yet. But 5 minutes, yeah, I can spare. Well, I mean, I guess it's not necessarily 5 minutes. You also have the cook time, which is about 20. So it's more like 30 minutes, I guess. But still, 30 minutes is pretty good for baking like bread, because bread is particularly like, I don't know, bread recipes are particularly bad about wait time. Especially if you have to incorporate yeast, because you have to just wait for that yeast to rise. But so long as you can deal with the wait time, right? Like, so I don't know. For instance, I'm just thinking off the top of my head, like I could in my work day if I wanted to do like a 3 hour recipe for the baguette, I could get the yeast started, get it mixed, and then set the dough aside, right? And then just go draw, right? And then while I'm drawing, set a timer for 30 minutes, and then every 30 minutes I go and do like the fold on the dough so that it builds up a little bit of strength. And so you only have to do that about. I'm making myself hungry talking about all this bread. Um, so, after about 3 hours, right? Probably by the end of that 3 hours, I'm probably done with what I'm drawing, odds are. And I can just send the bread off in the oven to bake, right? So I don't know. Like 3 hours is doable. You just have to make sure that you chop up your time in such a way that like it isn't the making of the bread isn't a distraction. It doesn't take up all your day, you know. And in fact, everything I just said, you could probably apply to that 27-hour recipe. It's just, what's funny too is I'm probably going to end up doing that 27-hour recipe at some point. Because I am vulnerable to delicious French bread. I remember when I went with my mom to the grocery store as a kid. There were two things I wanted when I was at the grocery store. First thing every month was, and this really dates me, uh, was the most like recent episode of the Sonic the Hedgehog comic put out by Archie at that time. Because at that time, um, like not just Archie comics, because I think Archie comics might still be sold in some grocery stores, but at that time, most most companies sold comics in grocery stores still. Like there was like a little comic book rack that would usually be around the candy aisle, which I mean you could probably, you know, guess what the logic was there. Um, and so every time I went to the store with my mom, we went to Albertsons. Um, I was just like, I have to check and make sure the newest episode of Sonic the Hedgehog hasn't come out, or issue, whatever you want to call it. And then the other thing was, we need to get a baguette of French bread, like like Albertsons at that time, and I don't know if they still do. They probably do. They had really great French bread, at least for me. I bet I can make better now. I'm talking BS. We'll see. I feel very confident now after my like pretzel victory, and maybe it's false confidence because yeah, I did a great job on baking pretzels for myself, but who says baguettes have to be like, you know, are going to be the same like level of ease? I ate so much French bread when I was a kid, though. There's just like the fluffiness and like, yeah, all that proofing. Blue Mouse says all that proofing. That's where they get you. It's having to proof all that bread. But yeah, I might be riding on false confidence from my pretzel victory. Like the baguettes might end up kicking my butt, and then I'll have to, um, take the walk of shame and like start over. But yeah, I think those are the three big ones: ciabatta, French baguette, ciabatta, focaccia. Because I really love focaccia. That's a really delicious bread. Um, and not, I mean, stores don't always, I don't know, not every store sells it. And also, here's my other thing: I don't actually eat that much bread that often, but I love bread, and I've made this pact with myself of like I'm just not gonna eat store bought bread anymore. I'm just if I'm gonna eat bread, I'm gonna make it, and then that way like I know what goes into the bread. Like I can um, keep the sugar content down to as little sugar as possible. Um, and keep the ingredients simple, right? Because honestly, like bread tastes better the fewer ingredients that are involved. Anyway, it's kind of amazing how that works. All right, so not quite done with this panel. Arrange some things here. There's a little flame in the background I want to put in. More of an orange color. All right. So I think the next thing I'll do is I'm gonna flat these two panels, or maybe these three panels, and then after I flat them, maybe color, and then after that I think we will call it for the stream. But that could be it's probably another 30 minutes. Me. So what I like to do, I always like to have like a base color that is beneath all the line art. This is largely for purposes having to do with print, not necessary for digital. Just start going at it with the Clip Studio fill bucket. Making life better. I'll probably, I don't know, I'm probably going to use a red. No. Maybe that color. And since we're here, I'll just finish coloring it. Here's where I like to use the gouache brushes in Clip Studio. They do a pretty good job of like throwing in this sort of. I tend to use the dry gouache more, but like the texture on the dry gouache is kind of excellent for like high intensity, energetic panels, stuff like that. It's just a great like background brush. Except I kind of want to totally reverse what I just did. In fact, I'll use the soft airbrush. And then that will be the dry gouache brush, which I'll have to do a layer above. I'll probably do another darker color to layer above that. Alright, so that's my background. For like cell shading, typically what I do is I just set up a layer that is like multiply at 50%. And then the color that I use, I tend to want to be something that works. Since y'all don't know what the scenery looks like, it's kind of more green and verdant. So, but it's also like a cloudy day in the environment that this panel is taking place in. So I'm kind of tending it towards a bluish green. And I'm going to get out the round mixing brush. It's my go-to. I try not to overthink the shading. It's just kind of like throw down shadow, have a pretty obvious light source. There are definitely dramatic effects that you can create with shading. But it just depends on what your environment is and sort of like what is the overall vibe of the scene. All right. Throw down some shadows there. And then I will get out soft eraser, make it kind of big. I just kind of lightly erase some of it so there's some variation in the lighting. And I might do some reflective lighting just a little bit. Have fun making dinner, Blue Mouse. Thanks for hanging out. Talk to you later. Ooh. Just saw someone wanted to fix. back to what I was doing. Once again, I'm going to take the soft eraser just to create some variation here. That is typically a done panel, but I do want to do one more thing, which is I'm going to take a little bit of this background color and using the soft airbrush, well, maybe, I don't know. Do I like it? I think so. So that's one panel down. And maybe I will it's already 5. Yeah, I might flat these last 2 panels and call it because I still want to go take a walk. Well, there's a lot of sun out. I haven't really gotten a lot of sun recently, and I don't know, it's nice to have. And it's a really great day today. It's been a pretty beautiful day. Sunny, temperature's nice. Not too cool, not too hot. Perfect spring weather. Which in Louisiana, where I live, I would say there's at best 1.5 to 2 months of like good spring weather. And then the summer sets in. And then it's terrible. Summer in Louisiana is like brutal. There's no other way of putting it. It is completely brutal. I'm not looking forward to it. There are a lot of people, I mean, obviously people who have the money to afford such a thing, but there are a lot of people who like they escape Louisiana when the summer sets in because it just gets so hot and humid that it's ridiculous. So, not entirely looking forward to the summer. There are things that I do like about the summer, but not looking forward to the heat. That's not going to be one of the things that I look forward to. Because it makes it pretty much impossible to do anything outdoors. Maybe in the early morning, like maybe in the morning hours, you can do some outdoor stuff. I've talked about this with a number of people, but like Louisiana actually has perfect weather 3/4 of the year, and then that summer makes you just not want to live here at all. Fall, winter, spring, great. Absolutely lovely. There's still some rain. There's a lot of rain, but like when it isn't raining and it's dry out and it's cool, it's perfect. Absolutely perfect. Some of the best weather. Some of my favorite weather, I should say. Not everybody's into that. This character is just looking in this box, thinking about all the scones that are missing. Leo Empire says, I feel like we get one good week in October. Knowing Leo and where he lives in high desert area. And from what he's told me in the past, it's pretty brutal throughout most of the year. Even right now, is the weather pretty brutal, Leo? Because he's told me about the summers, and the summers sound absolutely atrocious. And actually puts things in perspective for me because I'm like, well, although me and Leo have definitely had conversations about this where I think Leo is like, if he had his druthers, the the intense dry heat of Arizona is preferable to the humid like terror that is Louisiana. Oh, he was saying I was talking about Louisiana. I don't mind my weather now. I mean, it gets hot, but not yet. Oh no, like during the winter in Louisiana, it's actually pretty good. And during the spring, it's pretty good. It hasn't been very humid. Um, it's coming though. I can sense it coming. It is on the way. I can feel it in the air. I can hear it in the songs of the birds around me. They're getting ready. They know. Although I would say the birds seem to like it for the most part. But when it's like 108 degrees and it's like 100% humidity, oh, it's not good. Leo says the heat brings the high power bill, and it's been a while since I've exercised in that heat, so we'll see. Yeah, I'd imagine that would be pretty intense. Yeah, I think mirroring what you're saying, Leo. 108 degrees, 100% humidity is probably the temperature of hell. And so, I live in Louisiana to train myself for hell. I don't know. I need to find a state to escape to for the summer. Oh, did I? No, I didn't. Okay. Leo says, "Oh man, that's smart playing that long game." That's true. Leo says we can go meet our friend in Seattle. We have a mutual friend who lives in Seattle. Pacific Northwest is probably the best place to be during the summer in the United States. It's like the temperature is perfect generally. You know, don't go in August, I would say, but I don't know where you go in August in the United States. It's just hell on earth everywhere. Um, but June, July, oh my God, so nice. Dry, sunny, temperature doesn't really ever get above 80. Just wonderful. You go hike in the mountains or go to the coast. And the West Coast is quite beautiful. Leo suggests Denver. Yeah, Denver's good. Denver would be great. I would love to hang out in Colorado for the summer. Especially like Denver's pretty nice. I Colorado Springs or maybe Boulder. Although I was surprised. I don't know. I haven't spent a lot of time in Denver, but the one time I did go, I was surprised for a city as big as it is. The traffic really isn't that bad. Like there's traffic, but it's not like terrible. Not like Baton Rouge traffic, which is just terrible because Baton Rouge doesn't like itself. So it's just a city full of people who decided that they just really like sitting in their car for extended periods of time and possibly like one of the worst designed roadways in the United States. Leo says, "Yeah, I don't remember it being bad, but it's been like 20 years for me." He's referring to Denver. Yeah, I think I owe Denver another trip, or Colorado in general. I owe a trip in the near future. There's actually I don't know what to call it, like an institute or something, a school for like Tai Chi and Qigong that's like in Boulder. And I want to go check it out at some point in the future. And that would be one of the main reasons why I would want to go to Colorado. Although there are other reasons, of course. Gotta be really delicate here. How's your day going, Leo? We usually talk through voice chat, but today we're text to voice. All right. Leo says, not bad, almost done with work. Nice. Glad to hear it. I'm almost done with work too. Or at least I'm going to take a little break because I want to get out in the sun. Yeah, I'm going to finish this later. All right. Well, thank everybody who hung out today. It's been a really good, this is really great for me. I really enjoyed the conversations I had with everybody. Sorry also for the beginning. I forgot to check the mic, which is probably the most. I don't know if I've ever seen a stream where that didn't happen, at least at one point in time on some channel. Um, but I will do this again in the near future. And I will see y'all later. So, whatever you're doing, wherever you are, hope it goes well. And we will talk again soon. All right? Bye. Wait, hold on. Let me do this correctly. Bye.